Greetings, sailors, and welcome back to All Warships and an effort to re-kickstart my brain after last week when it went into self-isolation, as it sometimes does. There you go, there's a topical coronavirus reference for you all. So, this is just almost a random game there. This is a decent game that I played in the week in the Mok'Dor, which is sort of relevant at the moment in that it's a smokeless destroyer, but of course it's a rather different sort of smokeless destroyer than the Swedish ones, because they rely a lot more on their stealth. They do have the heel to work with as well, of course, which the French don't, but the French destroyers are all about that speed, of course. And in this particular case with the Mok'Dor, I've basically discarded stealth completely as a concept and gone for the best possible range that I can get, which in this case is 17.8 kilometers. So I'm essentially playing a small, very fast cruiser. It's what the Khabarovsk used to do so well, and well, now there's the Mok'Dor and the Kleber around, so Khabarovsk has been kind of overshadowed a bit. I don't know if it suffers as badly as it seems to in the popular consciousness as it was. I mean, you don't see Khabas around all that often these days, and maybe all the Khaba players switched to playing French destroyers instead. I don't know, but regardless of that, I think the Khaba does at least have better AA going for it, which is obviously a thing that the Swedish DDs have as well. It's not an especially prominent feature of the French destroyers, and so when you combine that with the prevalence of carriers at the moment, maybe makes them a bit less popular overall than they would be. And in this case, there is a carrier in play, but it's a tier 8 carrier, and fortunately for me, they're not going to make it their life's mission to kill me in the next several minutes, which is what typically happens when you do come up against a carrier. Although in this case, well, it's not like they're going to ignore me completely either. I do have a few brushes with them. But the fact that they're tier 8 means that although those Graf Zeppelin rocket planes are a threat to me, I can at least shoot some of them down, and this enemy carrier player is, I'm not going to say they're a bad carrier player, they do at least get one kill, but in terms of conserving their planes, they don't do that well, and so overall, yeah, they are much less of a threat than they might have been. It's still a bit annoying getting spotted by things that I'm reasonably sure aren't going to drop on me, because at the moment I'm trying to cap the middle in this Epicenter game. And normally I don't really have a lot of fun in Epicenter games. This is another one of the reasons why I chose this particular replay. But in this case, that's going to be an exception, because, well, I wouldn't be showing it really if it was a completely miserable game, although if it was spectacularly miserable for some reason, I might do, I suppose, but I don't tend to. I've got a couple of replays saved where there were particularly awful teams, but I don't tend to use those very much. I tend to prefer videos on my channel of replays where it was a fun game or there's something that you can learn from it, because it's just generally more entertaining. We've all had experience of the terrible teams, and I'm absolutely no different in that regard. I don't quite have the carrying capacity of, say, Flamu when it comes to salvaging teams and situations that otherwise look pretty dire. But I'm still at least an above average player. I like to think, maybe, when I'm not forgetting that this thing has a wide turning radius and running myself into an island when I'm still spotted. One good thing about that range, though, is that because I can run around and shoot at cruiser ranges, I'm a bit less of an attractive target, at least for surface ships. I have been very wary about getting closer, especially to, I mean, they've got a Friesland and a Kitakaze, which at close ranges would absolutely eat me alive. I can kick out a big burst of DPM with the main battery reload booster, of course, but in a sustained fight, they are going to beat me. So another reason why I've been keeping my distance in this one. I don't think I even really try to torp anyone. I think there's once or twice when I try and drop torps in this that you'll see. But for the most part, I play the Mogador as a pure gunboat. More so really than the ones leading up to it. I personally think the top of the French destroyer line is a lot better than the lower tiers, just because you can get your range out that much further with the extra module slot that you get on tier 9 and 10 ships. That gives you that extra 16% range if you go for that particular module. You could do that with the Swedish destroyers as well, but it'd be a bit of a waste. I mean, one of the hallmarks of the Swedish destroyers is they don't have good gun ranges, especially. And although the 120mm guns are actually pretty decent overall, they're not built for range, and they're not built for dodging at high speed, so they're much less suitable for this sort of thing. You really do want to play them around those Swedish ticklers. I really hope that catches on. The only other nickname I've ever gotten to catch on even was the Fat Freddy, of course, for the Friedrich Grosser. But I think that's mainly because Jingles picked it up, and a lot more people watch Jingles than I do. Anyway, I thought I'd have a peek out so I could get some shots at the Izumo, and then made the most unwelcome discovery that St. Louis is really quite far forward and uncomfortably close in terms of being a heavy cruiser with their own main battery reload. I do have the speed boost about to come back though, and because I was able to turn my tail to them relatively quickly, it's turned out to be not that big of a problem. It certainly could have been worse, and just in terms of my allies then taking them out very quickly, that helped immensely as well. This game is definitely not all just about me. The score screen at the end will be quite instructive, we shall say. Talking of scores and teams though, we're almost halfway into this. We've lost one ship, they've lost two. Both teams had an unusual amount of longevity for quite a large amount of this match. The enemy team, however, especially with their destroyers, seem to be being a lot more cautious about trying to take the caps, and they do have that outer ring at the moment, but with the time that we've had more caps than them for, we've built up quite a healthy lead. But I remember thinking as I was playing this, don't get complacent, they still have so many ships left alive. And this is exactly the sort of circumstance where sometimes you'll see teams getting completely overconfident just on the basis of points alone and not stopping to look at the enemy team roster. And if suddenly everyone starts pushing forwards at once, there's a very good chance they might get caught in a nasty crossfire, because this is an epicenter map. And if everyone piles into the middle, as we have a couple of ships doing in fact, it just means they can get crossfired from quite a lot of different places. So, just more pew-pewing from range. This is actually pretty good for me right now. I mean, I am potentially an isolated target for these guys to shoot at, but this is an awkward range for them to be firing at a small, fast target, although it's not small for a destroyer. But if you're trying to hit it with battleship guns or large cruiser guns, and it's somebody actively juking and dodging, then yeah, it's annoying to deal with. I've been on the opposite end of Mogadors and Klibers, but not that often. It kind of ties into what I was saying before about not seeing the Khabarovsk that often. I don't actually see these two very often either, but again, I think that's due to the prevalence of carriers at the moment. Because if a carrier does decide to just go after you, it becomes a completely different experience. There's not a lot you can do about it. And even if you do have smoke available in a destroyer, if a carrier decides to just exclusively go for you, you know, you might pop your smoke, and in anything other than really an American destroyer or something with American-style smoke in terms of how long it lasts, they might well just decide to hover their planes around, and there's not a lot you can do about it. But of course, that then represents bad team play from that carrier when they could be doing more useful things with their planes at that moment, potentially. But some carrier players seem to have taken a special delight in persecuting the destroyers to the exclusion of basically doing anything else. We've lost the middle at this point. They've realised that it's available to be capped, and because I was spotted there and because I know that the Z46 and the Kitakaze are still around, I was killing my speed a bit. I wasn't sure if there might be torps coming in this direction. But as it turns out, that Z46 is very low health. So I'm going to try and get them, although I don't actually quite manage it. It's the Graf Zeppelin's bombers that do. In firing, I've revealed my own position to all and sundry, including the Kitakaze, who is maybe a little closer than I'd like, so let's try and get some distance from them, and it also seems like a good time to use another main battery reload boost. Although, of course, they do have the option of smoking up, which they're going to avail themselves of very shortly. The Friesland is probably doing the most damage right now. The Cleveland might have landed one or two hits as well, but just the sheer rate of fire on the Friesland made that quite unpleasant. There's another chunk of health I've lost just there that, of course, I cannot replenish. But I've gotten some more distance now, so I at least have a bit more of a safety margin. This Salem, however, and this is Salem, this is the guy that's been chatty all throughout the game, right from the start of the game. Yeah, he's pushed in. I don't know if that was to try and get close enough to radar, or just to, I don't know, support me a bit, or just getting fed up of the remains of our team. You know, we're now outnumbered at this point. Being a bit, you know, like, there's targets we could overwhelm with fire right now, but they're all not in particularly good positions. But for whatever reason, you know, they go down, and that's not really a great ship to have lost at this point. I suspect it might just have been frustration that drove them forwards. And, of course, given what I said about numbers of ships and overconfidence, I think that probably did come into play in this particular match. We do still have the points advantage, but we're losing ground in terms of points, and we've definitely lost ground in terms of ships. That stage, though, or at this stage, rather, well, no, technically that past tense is correct, because this is a game that's... Well, which would be correct there? I don't know. I'm talking about it in the present tense, but it's technically a game that happened already, so past tense would also work, I guess. I don't know. I'm getting myself tied up over things that don't matter at all. But the Graf Zeppelin is pushing up, is what I'm trying to say. And now Graf Zeppelin, for some reason, has also gotten quite close to proceedings. I'm not entirely sure why both Graf Zeppelins felt the need to get that much closer to the enemy. I mean, obviously the Graf Zeppelin is known for the secondaries, but yeah, it's still a carrier. It's still not exactly the most armoured ship in the world, so yeah, I don't know. I can't really answer that, but at least it's both teams' carriers that are doing it. And it does represent an opportunity for me to get some more damage out of this. I'm already at a quite comfortable 67k, basically all from, well, guns and fires. I don't know how much of that is fire damage, actually. But this Graf Zeppelin does represent a good opportunity to yeah, get a bit more. Although, I don't want to get too close. I'm now rather down on hit points. It really does depend if they're built for secondary spec or not. Although if they were, I suspect I would be within range already. I also don't know why I only put out one set of torps here, by the way. That was a bit odd. Could have easily put out both sets on my starboard side, but for some reason I decided not to. And I almost did score a hit just with those two that got put out, but either the Graf Zeppelin was steering manually or just happened to be making a turn at that point anyway. So sadly they missed. It's not going to save this Graf Zeppelin though, but It's also not going to save our Graf Zeppelin. So at least they're both going out together. Maybe this Graf Zeppelin just really, really fancied a secondary battle with our Graf Zeppelin. Who knows? Either way, both carriers being out is actually probably more beneficial to us at this stage, with being ahead. It means I can less likely get spotted from the air. I don't have to worry about rocket planes taking me out anymore, which could have been a real threat at this stage. But of course, it's not like we would not also have benefited from having our own carrier still in play. It was a bit of a peculiarity, that. I don't know what to say about it other than that. It was just odd that both carriers ended up within secondary battery range of each other. So all that's left now is Kitakaze on their side and that Izumo. And the Kitakaze could pose a threat, but I've also got a bunch of cruisers backing me up, and we've still got our own Izumo, who's been quite skittish. They will end up with a dreadnought in this, so they've obviously been taking some fire. But the chatty Salem earlier on was getting a bit peeved with them in particular, I think because they were firing HE, but you'll see a possible explanation for it in the actual chat, that they fat-fingered their keyboard and ended up selecting the wrong ammo type and then not realising they had, which can happen. But you have to be particularly not paying attention for it to happen in a battleship, I have to say. So perhaps not the most attentive player in the world, but at least they're still alive and still able to shoot at stuff. And it's not like the enemy Izumo's been any less standoffish, to be honest. So we're almost there on points, and there's a Confederate for me. That's quite nice. We're almost already there on time as well, so we don't have that much space to kill this Izumo, but between everybody that's left firing at him, yeah, he's not going to last. It just remains to be seen whether it'll be one of those cruisers getting a Kraken, or whether some sneaky little so-and-so in a destroyer is going to deny them by getting the final kill through a fire. It really wasn't intentional to get that kill secure. It just kind of worked out that way, so apologies to those cruisers, but oh well. Oops, these things happen. Just under 100k, not bad, but I think the more remarkable thing about this game was 4 players getting over 2,000 base XP. The Goliath in particular, 2,500, followed up by that Donskoy at 2,300. That was a pretty good showing from both of those, and of course I was in a very solid 3rd place. 1.8 million potential damage also. It just goes to show you that if you're playing it right, these things can tank, in quotation marks, as much as a battleship. But unlike a battleship, you don't get to get any hit points back. And unlike some of the tier 9 and 10 battleships where you can be tanking 4 or 5 million damage in a really good game, I don't think you would manage quite that much somehow in a French destroyer unless you were facing a set of opponents that really didn't know how to aim. So that is about it for this replay. I have some other stuff for this week. We've got all our test ships back at least, and I need to do another Tropico, and I need to do another supporter video as well, so stay tuned for those. But yeah, hopefully this week's going to be better overall. Last week my sleep was particularly bad. That just knocks on everything else, as I'm sure of you, those of you that have your own sleep problems know all too well. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you did, you can do all the usual things down underneath it, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.